Every Thanksgiving, I was stuck babysitting my family's guests' kids. This year, I finally refused. And the next day, my aunt called to say her holiday was ruined because she had to parent her own children. I'm 16 years old, and for as long as I can remember, Thanksgiving at our house has meant one thing. The moment our guests walk through the door, I automatically become the designated babysitter. Not by choice, not by request, but by some unspoken family law that everyone seems to understand except me. It's supposed to be this big, joyous occasion where everyone comes together to celebrate and enjoy each other's company, but for me, it's always been anything but that. Every single year, as soon as the guests arrive, they immediately offload their kids onto me. They don't even hesitate. It's like they all collectively decided years ago that I was the designated babysitter, no questions asked. They just show up, hand their kids over to me, and vanish into the adult world of laughter, drinks, and conversations, leaving me stuck with a bunch of hyperactive, sugar-fueled little terrors. And let me be clear about these kids, they are completely out of control. They don't listen to a word I say, and they think it's absolutely hilarious to misbehave. They throw food at me, break things, and make a mess wherever they go. It's exhausting. I spend the entire day chasing after them, cleaning up their chaos, and trying to keep them from destroying the house while everyone else is having fun, relaxing, and actually enjoying the holiday. The worst part? It's not like I get a thank you for all my hard work either. No one even acknowledges what I'm doing. Once the evening winds down and the guests are ready to leave, they just scoop up their kids without a word of gratitude, as if it's my natural obligation to play the unpaid babysitter every single year. As if I exist solely for their convenience. Honestly, I've had enough of it. I'm tired of missing out on Thanksgiving just because everyone else decided that my role in the family is to be their kids' keeper. This year, I decided things were going to be different. I was completely fed up with being everyone's default babysitter and missing out on the holiday while everyone else relaxed and enjoyed themselves. I made up my mind that I would actually celebrate like the rest of the family for once. I wasn't going to let anyone guilt me or push me into taking care of the kids no matter how much they tried. The thought of finally standing my ground gave me this mix of excitement and nervous energy, but I knew I had to follow through. I deserved to sit at the table, laugh with everyone, and eat my meal in peace just like everyone else. I deserved to be part of the celebration instead of working through it. When the guests began to arrive, it all unfolded exactly as I'd expected, like a well-rehearsed script they performed every year. As soon as they stepped through the door, they barely greeted me before gesturing to their kids. "Go find her, she'll take care of you," they told their little ones, as if handing them over to me was the most natural thing in the world. It wasn't a question, let alone a request. They just assumed it would happen like it always did. I heard them say it, I could not hear it, but I pretended I didn't. Instead, I stayed in the kitchen, focused on helping my mom. I busied myself peeling potatoes, arranging the serving dishes, and setting the table, all the while ignoring the unspoken expectation hanging in the air that I was supposed to jump into babysitter mode. It wasn't long before my aunt arrived, and I knew right away that she was about to test my resolve. She walked into the kitchen holding her kids' jackets, her heels clicking loudly against the floor, and called my name from across the room. Her tone was sharp and commanding, the kind that adults use when they assume you're going to drop everything and do exactly as they say. I turned to her reluctantly, already bracing myself for what was coming. Sure enough, she motioned for me to come closer and without so much as a please, said, "Take off their outerwear and babysit them." Her words hung in the air for a moment as I processed them. She had delivered the instructions so casually, so matter-of-factly, as though my entire purpose at Thanksgiving was to serve her and her children. But this time, I wasn't going to play along. I stood my ground and looked her directly in the eye. "I'm not going to do it," I said firmly, my voice steady despite the nervous flutter in my stomach. The look on her face was priceless, pure, unfiltered shock. It was as if she couldn't comprehend what I had just said. "What do you mean you're not going to do it?" she asked, her voice tinged with disbelief, as if the idea of me refusing her was completely alien. I repeated myself, just as calmly but with a little more weight this time. "I'm busy helping my mom," I said simply, turning back to the task at hand as if the conversation was over. She stood there for a moment, frozen, holding her kids' jackets, clearly at a loss for what to do next. Her reaction was almost comical. You'd think I had just declared some kind of family mutiny. Finally, when she realized I wasn't going to budge, she was forced to take off her kids' outerwear herself. The way she fumbled with the buttons and zippers, huffing in irritation, you would have thought I had handed her the most unreasonable task in the world. Her face said it all. It was like I had committed some unspeakable act of rebellion just by refusing to babysit. When it was finally time to sit down at the table, I moved quickly to claim a seat alongside everyone else. My heart was racing a little as I slid into my chair. I was determined to finally enjoy the meal like a regular guest. I wasn't going to give anyone a chance to rope me into babysitting duties. For the first time in years, I felt like I could relax, even if only for a moment. The smell of turkey and stuffing filled the air, the table was beautifully set, and everyone was settling in, talking and laughing as plates were passed around. I grabbed a roll and buttered it, feeling almost giddy about the simple act of being able to sit down and eat with the family like I was supposed to. Of course, it didn't take long for the usual chaos to begin. The kids, as expected, didn't stay seated for more than a few minutes. They started running around the dining room and living room, their voices growing louder as they turned the house into their personal playground. Normally, this would have been the moment where everyone turned to me with those expectant looks, silently telling me it was time to step up and take control of the situation. But this year, I didn't budge. I stayed firmly in my seat, enjoying my food and joining in on the conversations around me. For the first time, I wasn't the one chasing after them, shushing them, or cleaning up their messes. I just let it all happen in the background, fully embracing the idea that this wasn't my responsibility anymore. Then it happened, the inevitable moment I'd been expecting all along. My aunt, who had been watching the chaos unfold with increasing irritation, decided it was time to say something. She put down her fork with a dramatic clink and, in a tone that was just loud enough to be heard over the commotion, said, "Someone needs to look after the children." Her words hung in the air, slicing through the general buzz of conversation at the table. She glanced around the room slowly, her eyes scanning each adult seated at the table as if waiting for someone to volunteer. But no one did. The other adults avoided her gaze, clearly unwilling to take on the task themselves. Finally, her eyes landed squarely on me. Her expression was sharp and expectant, and there was no mistaking the target of her frustration. "It's your duty as a girl to babysit the children," she said, her voice dripping with irritation and disapproval. For a moment, I just stared at her, completely dumbfounded. Did she really just say that? My mind raced, trying to process the sheer audacity of her statement. The words felt so outdated, so blatantly unfair. I could feel my frustration bubbling to the surface, and I knew I couldn't let this slide. I took a deep breath, steadied myself, and looked her directly in the eye. "It's not my duty," I said firmly, my voice calm but resolute. "And this year, someone else can take care of them." My words landed like a bomb. My aunt's face froze, her expression somewhere between disbelief and outrage. It was as if she couldn't fathom that I had just stood up to her. For a moment, the entire table went silent. Clinking of silverware stopped, and everyone turned to look at me, their eyes wide with shock. My mom, sitting just a few seats away, looked stunned as well, her fork hovering midair as if she couldn't believe what she just heard. Tension in the room was almost palpable, but I didn't waver. I held my ground, refusing to back down or let the weight of their stares intimidate me. Nobody else stepped in to offer their help either, which only seemed to infuriate my aunt more. She sat there for a moment, fuming silently, before finally letting out a dramatic huff. "Well, I guess I'll have to do it myself if it's so hard for you to do it for once," she said, her tone dripping with passive aggressiveness. Her words hit me like a slap, not because they made me feel guilty, but because of the sheer hypocrisy behind them. For once? I've been the one looking after the kids every Thanksgiving for as long as I can remember. Year after year, I've been the one missing out on the meal, the conversations, and the celebrations because I was too busy being everyone's unpaid nanny. And now she was acting like this was some huge burden she was taking on for me? It was almost laughable. Still, I stayed firm. I wasn't going to let her guilt trip me into giving up my one chance to enjoy the holiday. The rest of the meal went on, but the tension between my aunt and me was palpable. She kept shooting me glares throughout dinner, and by the time the evening was over and the guests were getting ready to leave, she was clearly fuming. As she gathered her things, she made a few passive-aggressive comments about how some people don't understand family obligations and how disappointed she was in me. It was obvious she was directing all of it at me, but I didn't say anything. I just let her rant and walked away. So, am I the asshole for refusing to babysit the kids? I'm just tired of it. I wanted to enjoy Thanksgiving for once, like everyone else gets to do. I wanted to sit at the table, eat my meal while it was still hot, and be part of the family celebration instead of working through it. Was that really so wrong? The day after Thanksgiving, I thought the whole ordeal might blow over. My aunt had made her passive-aggressive comments the night before, and while the tension had been thick enough to cut with a knife, I figured she would just simmer in silence and let it go. But I was wrong, very wrong. I was sitting in my room, scrolling through my phone, trying to decompress from the holiday chaos when my phone buzzed. It was my aunt. I hesitated for a second before picking up, already bracing myself for what I knew was going to be a difficult conversation. And sure enough, the moment I answered, her voice came through sharp and accusatory. She didn't even start with a greeting. Instead, she launched right into it, demanding an explanation for my behavior the night before. In her view, I had somehow turned Thanksgiving into a personal affront against her, and she wanted answers. Why, she wanted to know, had I refused to look after the children when I always did it before? Why had I forced her to take care of the kids when she was a guest in my home? Did I not understand how much of a burden I had placed on her? I took a deep breath and tried to keep my composure as I explained my side of things. I told her that I was simply tired of being the default babysitter year after year. I wasn't trying to ruin anyone's holiday or shirk some imaginary responsibility. I just wanted to celebrate like everyone else for once. I wanted to sit at the table, enjoy the food, and be part of the conversations instead of chasing after screaming kids and cleaning up their messes all night. It wasn't fair to expect me to sacrifice my holiday every year just because it was convenient for everyone else. But my aunt wasn't having it. The moment I started explaining myself, she cut me off, her voice sharper and more irritated with every word. She didn't care about my reasons or my feelings. In her mind, there was only one perspective that mattered, hers. She launched into a laundry list of grievances about how my actions had ruined her Thanksgiving. According to her, because I had refused to do my so-called duty, she had been stuck with the children all night. Every time she tried to sit down and join the adults, one of the kids was crying or fighting or about to knock something over. She said she couldn't even eat her meal properly because she was too busy running after them, trying to make sure they didn't destroy the house or hurt themselves. Her voice grew more dramatic as she continued, painting a picture of her supposed martyrdom. By the time the night was over, she told me, she was so exhausted that all she could think about was going home and collapsing into bed. But even that wasn't enough to recover from the ordeal. She declared that she was so worn out and overwhelmed from Thanksgiving that she was already planning a vacation. Yes, a vacation, just to get over the stress of the evening. The way she said it, you'd think she had just survived some kind of disaster, not spent one night looking after her own kids. But of course, she didn't stop there. She quickly shifted gears and turned the conversation into a lecture, the kind that only someone with a sense of entitlement like hers could deliver. She started going on and on about how I didn't understand what it was like to have children. She said I couldn't possibly grasp the sheer amount of work, patience, and sacrifice that went into being a parent. She described how relentless it was, how it wore you down, and how every moment of your day was consumed by the needs of your kids. According to her, it wasn't just physically exhausting but emotionally draining as well. The way she said it, you'd think she was the only person in the world who had ever raised children. There was this underlying tone of judgment in everything she said, like she believed her status as a parent somehow gave her the moral high ground. And because I was still young and childless, she made it clear that in her eyes I had no right to complain about anything. Didn't matter how tired or frustrated I was, I didn't have kids, so my feelings were invalid by default. As she rattled on, I could feel my frustration building. Her words were so self-centered, so dismissive, and so unfair that it was almost impossible to stay calm. The more she talked, the more it became clear that she saw me as nothing more than an extra set of hands, a convenient solution to her own problems. She wasn't upset because she genuinely thought I'd done something wrong. She was upset because I had dared to disrupt the status quo, the one where she could dump her responsibilities on me and get away with it. Finally, I couldn't hold it in any longer. When she paused long enough for me to get a word in, I told her exactly what I thought. I said she was absolutely right. I didn't know what it was like to have children. I didn't know what it was like to stay up all night with a sick baby or to spend every waking moment worrying about someone else's needs. And that was precisely the point. These weren't my children, they were hers. And it wasn't my job to take care of them. I hadn't chosen to become a parent, she had. If she brought her kids to a family gathering, it was her responsibility to watch them, not mine. I told her I understood that parenting was hard and exhausting, but that didn't mean she had the right to offload her responsibilities onto me just because it was convenient for her. I could feel my voice getting stronger as I spoke, all the frustration and resentment I'd been holding back for years spilling out. I wasn't the one who decided to have kids, I told her, so why should I be the one expected to look after them? It wasn't fair and it wasn't right and I wasn't going to do it anymore. She was their mother, not me. And if she couldn't handle them for one evening, then maybe she should think twice before bringing them to an event where she expected someone else to take over. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I thought for a moment that my words might have gotten through to her, but then she came back with another argument, this time leaning into the idea that I was too young to sit at the same table as the adults. According to her, it was my job to look after the children because I wasn't really part of the adult group yet. She went on about how I should respect my elders, obey their wishes, and accept that babysitting the kids was my place in the family. It was almost laughable, the way she was trying to justify her outdated expectations, but I wasn't laughing. Instead, I told her that I disagreed. I wasn't a little kid anymore, I was 16 years old. I was old enough to contribute to the family celebration in ways that didn't involve babysitting, and I deserved to sit at the table and enjoy Thanksgiving like everyone else. I also pointed out that this wasn't her house. Thanksgiving was hosted at our house, and that meant she didn't have the right to dictate what I should or shouldn't do. If she wanted to set rules about babysitting, she could do that at her own house, not ours. I went on to say that as a guest, it was her responsibility to take care of her own children. It wasn't fair or reasonable to expect the hosts, or anyone else for that matter, to take on that burden just because she didn't feel like doing it. And even more than that, it wasn't right for her to treat me like some kind of unpaid babysitter just because I was younger than her. I told her flat out that if she brought her kids to Thanksgiving, she needed to be prepared to look after them herself because I wasn't going to do it anymore. My words seemed to hit her like a brick wall. She sputtered for a moment, clearly at a loss for how to respond. I could tell she was searching for a counterargument, something to regain control of the conversation, but she couldn't find anything. Every point she tried to make had already been addressed, and she had no choice but to let the silence stretch on. By the time the call ended, I could tell she was still angry, but she didn't have much else to say. I hung up feeling equal parts relieved and exhausted. It wasn't easy standing up to her, but I knew I had done the right thing. For the first time, I had set a boundary and stuck to it. And while it was clear my aunt wasn't happy about it, I felt a sense of pride in knowing that I had finally stood my ground. Later that day, after my frustrating conversation with my aunt, I thought I might finally get a break from the drama. I was wrong. As I sat in my room, still replaying the argument in my head and wondering if I could have said things differently, I heard a knock on my door. My mom walked in, her face a mix of concern and that unmistakable "we need to talk" expression that parents always have when they're about to bring up something unpleasant. She sat down on the edge of my bed, and I immediately knew what this was about. Sure enough, she started by telling me that my aunt had called her earlier in the day. My heart sank a little as she explained how my aunt had complained about my behavior at Thanksgiving, claiming that I had been disrespectful and uncooperative. According to my aunt, I had shirked my responsibilities and left her to deal with the children all by herself, ruining her holiday in the process. My mom said my aunt was upset, no furious, and that she had gone on and on about how I had refused to help, how I had been rude when asked to babysit, and how I had supposedly disrespected her authority as someone older. My mom wasn't yelling at me or anything, but I could tell she was bothered by what my aunt had said. She told me that in our family we were taught to respect our elders and help them when they needed it. She explained that my aunt had felt hurt and overwhelmed, and that as someone younger I should have stepped in to make things easier for her. My mom wasn't angry exactly, but there was definitely a hint of disappointment in her tone, and that stung more than I wanted to admit. It was clear to me that my aunt had twisted the story to paint herself as the victim. She had conveniently left out all the time she had dumped her responsibilities onto me without a second thought, or how she had tried to guilt-trip me into taking care of her kids as if it were my job. And of course, she hadn't mentioned how she'd snapped at me and acted like I'd committed some terrible crime by wanting to enjoy Thanksgiving with everyone else. Instead, she'd spun a version where she was the overworked, underappreciated guest who just wanted a little help and got disrespect in return. Hearing my mom repeat my aunt's complaints made me feel a wave of frustration and sadness. It was like the entire burden of the situation had been placed on me again, and my side of the story didn't even matter. But I knew I couldn't stay silent. If I didn't explain what really happened, my mom would only have my aunt's version to go on, and that wasn't fair. Not to me, not to the truth, and honestly, not to my mom either. So I took a deep breath and told my mom everything. I started from the very beginning, explaining how every year I was expected to be the default babysitter. I told her how I had spent countless Thanksgivings chasing after the kids, cleaning up their messes, and missing out on the celebrations while everyone else got to relax and enjoy themselves. I described how the parents, especially my aunt, would barely say a word to me before handing their kids over, as if it were some unspoken rule that I was responsible for them. And I reminded her that I had never complained before, even when the kids were throwing food at me, wrecking the house, or making me miss out on all the fun. Then I told her about what happened this year. I explained how I had made the decision to finally stand up for myself and enjoy Thanksgiving like everyone else. I told her how my aunt had immediately assumed I would babysit, demanding that I take care of her kids without even asking. I described how I had politely refused, saying I was busy helping in the kitchen, and how my aunt had reacted with shock and irritation. I told her about the dinner table confrontation, where my aunt said it was my duty as a girl to babysit the kids, and how I had finally stood my ground and said no. Finally, I explained how hurtful it had been to hear my aunt's comments after the guests left, and how her phone call earlier in the day had only made things worse. I told my mom that while I understood parenting was hard and exhausting, it wasn't fair for my aunt to treat me like a built-in nanny just because I was younger. They weren't my kids, they were hers, and it wasn't my responsibility to take care of them, especially when I had no say in the matter. I wasn't trying to be disrespectful or selfish. I just wanted to enjoy Thanksgiving like everyone else for once. As I spoke, I could see my mom's expression start to shift. First, she looked unsure, like she was trying to balance her loyalty to her sister with what I was saying. But as I kept explaining, I could tell she was starting to see my side of things. She nodded slowly, and I could see the wheels turning in her head as she replayed the events of the night in her mind. My mom admitted that she hadn't realized just how much pressure I'd been under in past years. She said she always assumed I didn't mind watching the kids since I'd never said anything about it before. She acknowledged that it wasn't fair for me to miss out on Thanksgiving year after year, especially when no one even thanked me for stepping up. And as she thought more about it, she said she could understand why I felt the way I did, why I was tired of being the default babysitter and wanted to finally enjoy the holiday with everyone else. She wasn't completely ready to side against my aunt, though. She still felt that as a family we should try to help each other out when we could, and she didn't think my aunt's frustration was entirely unjustified. But she also said that my aunt could have handled things differently, and that most of what I'd said was valid. My mom told me that she was proud of me for standing up for myself in a respectful way, even if it had caused some tension in the family. And she promised that next year things would be different. For the first time since this whole ordeal began, I felt truly heard and understood. My mom finally saw that I wasn't being selfish or disrespectful. I was just a teenager who wanted to enjoy Thanksgiving with her family instead of working through it. The relief I felt in that moment was overwhelming. After years of being taken for granted, after a day of being painted as the villain, my mom finally understood my side of the story. She saw that I had been carrying an unfair burden for years, and she acknowledged that I had every right to want something different. As we talked more, my mom shared some of her own experiences from when she was young, times when she felt like family expectations were placed on her simply because of her age or gender. She said she remembered feeling frustrated when adults assumed she would automatically help with certain tasks without being asked, and she could see parallels between her experiences and mine. She also admitted that she had fallen into the same trap as everyone else, assuming that because I had always stepped up before, I was okay with the arrangement. She said she should have checked in with me years ago, should have asked how I felt about always being the one to watch the kids. "I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner," she said, and those words meant everything to me. We talked for a long time that evening, working through the complicated dynamics of our family, the unspoken expectations that had been placed on me, and how we could handle things differently going forward. My mom promised that she would have a conversation with my aunt and the other family members about sharing babysitting duties more fairly, or better yet, expecting parents to manage their own children. She also said that next Thanksgiving there would be clear boundaries in place. If relatives wanted to bring their children, they would need to be prepared to supervise them. The days of automatically assuming I would take on that responsibility were over. By the time our conversation ended, I felt lighter than I had in years. The weight of all those unspoken expectations, all that built-up resentment, had finally been acknowledged and addressed. I wasn't the villain in this story. I was a teenager who had finally found her voice and used it to advocate for herself.